This podcast is part of the Deluxe Edition Network. To find other great shows on the network, head over to deluxeeditionnetwork.com. That's deluxeeditionnetwork.com.
If your friends are nerdy and you are nerdy too, I want to talk to you. Friends Talking Nerdy.
This is the podcast making, public transit taking, kiss stealing, wheeling, dealing, son of a gun, Tim the Nerd, welcoming you to another episode of Friends Talking Nerdy, part of the Deluxe Edition Network. Head to deluxeeditionnetwork.com to find out about all of the lovely shows on the Den. And seated next to me, we have the birthday girl, the most electrifying professor in podcasting today, Professor Aubrey. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing good. How are you doing, Tim?
Doing good. And as I mentioned, it is your birthday, which leads us to our special topic for this week and probably next week as well.
And what is that, Tim?
Well, one thing we love talking about on this show, and will continue to do so as long as Friends Talking Nerdy is a thing, is talking about music. And what I thought would be interesting was to do a deep dive on some of the albums released in 1974. See if there are any albums that you are a fan of that particular time. We'll find out there will probably be some that you're not necessarily a fan of, and maybe we'll come across some that neither of us have ever really heard of before.
I bet we will.
It's possible, but I personally curated the list thanks to our friends at Wikipedia. Thank you, everybody there. So we'll go through it artist by artist, album by album, and give you the album title, as well as a couple of tracks from that particular album, and just give you our thoughts. Are you ready to dive in?
Yeah, sounds great.
All right. The first album we're going to talk about is from one Carly Simon.
Hey.
She released the album Hotcakes, and the big song off of that album was Haven't Got Time for the Pain.
Hey.
I haven't got time for the pain. I mean, she's got such a great voice. This is at the time when she was married to James Taylor, and I mean, even though their marriage wasn't as long-lived because of James Taylor celebrating the rock and roll lifestyle a little too much in the 70s, they had a lot of crossover, I guess, musically. I mean, they had they sounded well together. They worked well together when they did create stuff. But, Carly Simon, apart from this particular song too, is also responsible for one of my favorite James Bond songs as well. So I will always have a soft spot in my heart for her. Plus, she is related to the people that started the book company, Simon & Schuster.
Hey. That's interesting. I didn't know that. I've always liked Carly Simon, and I was thinking about the James Bond song when you first mentioned her name.
Yeah, like today, I would think the more casual music fan out there, our age or younger, if they were asked about her, would probably name the James Bond theme song first, in terms of stuff that they're aware of. But, she does have a great catalog of work. Yeah, not all of it works for me necessarily, but, songs like Haven't Got Time for the Pain, really damn good song.
Absolutely.
Yep. All right, any other thoughts on Carly Simon, or shall I go on?
Let's go on.
The next one here, and being that it was released in 74, it must have been Kismet. Mr. Zimmerman must have known that one of his biggest fans was going to be born that year, so he wanted to prepare the world with an album called Planet Waves. It's Bob Dylan.
Planet Waves.
And the big song off of that is the song Forever Young. They have a slow version and a fast version on that album, apparently.
Hey, that's a great song.
Yeah, I believe that is the one that Rod Stewart in the 80s covered. because he did a song, Rod Stewart, one of his last big things before MTV Unplugged and then, totally being off the network. He did a song called Forever Young, where he was like in the back of a truck.
Yeah, I think it's the same song.
Yeah. But any thoughts on that particular album? When I first brought up that album to you, I think this might be one that you're not totally aware of, apart from like the Forever Young.
I mean, yeah, exactly. Like I know I've heard of the album. I know that song, but I couldn't tell you anything else that was on that album or like what kind of music it was. Bob Dylan has done so many different types of music.
Yeah, and so many different albums, period. I mean, I believe he was doing an album every year or so since the 60s.
Wow.
Since then, and so it's, yeah, quite the catalog. Like, there's some Rolling Stones albums, some of the early stuff that I haven't, listened to myself, apart from, the songs that show up on various greatest hits albums. I don't need to hear the first couple Rolling Stones albums because that group is not the group I fell in love with, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on this?
That's how I felt about Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
I like the 60s Bob Dylan, and all the post of that was like not as good.
You should have retired. I mean, he did have a somewhat fruitful 70s, and then, of course, the 80s didn't necessarily go so well, but if you cap off a decade by doing something as popular as A Traveling Wilburys, you can't say, things were totally bad for him.
I thought that was more in the 90s.
No, late 80s.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love them.
So how about we go on to the next one?
Okay.
All right. This is another one I told you about that was released that particular year. One, Miss Joni Mitchell released her album Court and Spark. 3 of the songs that were the singles off of it were Help Me, Raised on Robbery, and Free Man in Paris. So are you familiar with that album?
No. Not at all.
Yeah, I did listen to a few seconds of the tracks in question, and yeah, Joni Mitchell, I do have a deep respect for her. Like, I want to make that totally clear. But you can have a deep respect for an artist and still say their stuff doesn't work for me.
Yeah, I mean, I love Joni Mitchell Blue. Like, that's such a great album. But like, a lot of Joni Mitchell's other stuff, I'm just not attracted to.
Yeah. All right. So with that, I think we will move on to the next choice here. And the next choice, the album in question, the title track was the #1 song in America on the day you were born.
Really?
Yes, from Miss Barbra Streisand, The Way We Were.
The Way We Were.
She is someone that is a paradox in a lot of ways. Like, she did break down a lot of barriers. Like, let's take her foray into Hollywood. I mean, as a woman director in the 70s, she was able to get some doors open because of her name, and because she was successful, it allowed other women to get opportunities they may not have had before. So very much a positive there. But on the flip side too, when it comes to Barbra Streisand, if you have one image in mind of elite Hollywood trash, it's Barbra Streisand. Like, just the type of person, and by the elite Hollywood trash, I'm referring to a very specific type that want to be condescending when it comes to them talking about their political opinions.
Mm-hmm.
And I say this as someone who 9 times out of 10 would probably agree with most of, what she has talked about, supporting in the past. So it's not about me trying to say, how dare someone who's saying something I disagree with talk. It's just, a lot of times Hollywood people could be quite arrogant.
For sure. Well, I liked it when she turned into a robot and was mechanized and was Mecha Streisand on South Park.
Yes. She had to get her triangle back. The triangle's in there.
The triangle's in there.
Yeah. But anyway, any other thoughts on Barbra Streisand? Like, to me, like, she's like if Frank Sinatra and Wayne Newton had a baby and it was a girl.
I really like Funny Girl, and I I thought she was a great actress.
I haven't really seen her in too much. I've essentially seen scenes of movies that she's been in, and yeah, I mean Barbra Streisand's not making movies for me. Let's put it that way.
No.
Not enough explosions. Like if she had a movie to where she had like the two handguns and jumping to the side, shooting them off, maybe I would see that little John Woo action. It's Barbra Streisand and John Woo's new epic.
Yeah, not gonna happen.
All right. How about I go on to the next one here?
Okay, sounds good.
All right. From Mr. Graham Parsons, I believe this album was released posthumously. And it's one I've also talked about on Tim's Tremendous Tapes, Grievous Angel.
Oh, yeah, that's a great one.
Yeah, that's this album that has his version of Love Hurts, a duet he did with Emmylou Harris.
Mm-hmm, so good.
Yeah, and I think if I remember correctly, this album was like one of her first big, hey world, listen to her, kind of like, if I had to use a rap analogy in a lot of ways, it was like what Dr. Dre did for Snoop Dogg on his first solo album.
Right.
And it, two wildly different genres here, but kind of the same method. Graham Parsons was using his power to, say, hey, check her out. And I think the world is a better place for that.
Yeah, old Graham Parsons. What a sweetheart.
Indeed. And, I've talked to before about, like his friendships with various musicians and how, a guy who I believe was not, raised in the South or anything like that, but he had an intense love for country music, not only helped people like Emmylou Harris, he inspired, his friends like Keith Richards from the Rolling Stones to get more into country music. So he's one of those unsung heroes that may not necessarily be on the tip of the tongue for the average music listener today, but people should check him out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
Any thoughts on Graham?
Just that. Right. I mean, I agree with that.
All right. So shall we go on to the next one then?
Yeah. What's the next one?
All right. The next one. I love little things that the internet can provide. What do I mean by that? Somebody pointed out that if you take Gordon Lightfoot and put a picture of him and Bryan Cranston together, they look almost identical. Gordon Lightfoot in 1974 released an album called Sundown, the title track, of course, being one of the big hits. I was like, Sundown,
and I find you've been walking on my back stairs or some kind of shit like that.
Something like that. It's definitely a unique sound. And one I may, at least for this particular song, may pop onto a playlist or something like that. It's not a bad song.
No.
But
I love Gordon Lightfoot.
Yeah.
The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, such a great song.
I've never really taken the time to, listen to him too much, but who knows? Maybe one of these days.
Yeah, I think you'd like him.
Yep. All right. How about I go on to the next one?
Yes.
All right. A band that actually appeared on What's Happening. The Doobie Brothers.
Hey.
They released an album called What Were Once Vices Are Now Habits, and one of the big tracks on there was Blackwater. Oh, Blackwater.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Never a fan of the Doobie Brothers. I do respect them as musicians, but just too mellow for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, whoa, listen to the music. No, thank you. I don't want to hear that. And the black, it doesn't work. And then the only thing you could imagine is that, they made a killing in the 70s because they had the name Doobie on, for their band name. So kids were probably thinking, oh man, you're going to sing about weed. Yeah, man.
Or they're on weed while they're singing.
Yeah, you could smoke doobies. They're brothers because they smoke weed. Something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts on the Doobie Brothers?
I like the Doobie Brothers.
Yeah.
I had a Doobie Brothers 8-track for a while.
Oh.
Yeah, it was good.
Okay. I've seen 8-tracks, and I've as a kid, been around various people that had them, but I would never want one. The idea of a musical device that will play half the song and then stop and then have to go to a different part of the particular tape to play you the rest of the song. Screw that.
Yeah, I mean it's very old technology.
Thank goodness it's not coming back like vinyl.
Nope.
Yep. All right. How about I go on to the next one?
Yes.
And this is an album that we've talked about a few times on the show before here from Dolly Parton, Jolene.
What a great album.
Released in 74, the two big hits, Jolene and I Will Always Love You. She wrote I Will Always Love You to Porter Wagner, who was one of the first guys who gave her big break. She was a co-star on his television show and also part of his traveling concert team. But when she wanted to leave, she wrote that song for him.
Yeah, because he had found her and gave her a chance. And so she felt very loyal to him. But at the end of the day, she was much more talented than he was.
Yeah, there's a reason we're talking about her and not Porter Wagner.
Yeah.
But to Porter Wagner's credit, though, like he didn't try to do like what I believe Benny Goodman or somebody tried to do with Frank Sinatra in terms of like icing him out and preventing him from having a career until the mob had to get involved.
Right.
But yeah, the fact that, he just told, let her go with his blessing. I believe he asked her like produce this album. So I think he produced this album, but she was cool with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on the Jolene album?
No, just it was really good.
All right, I will go on to the next one here. This is one that you may not have heard, but a little bit of trivia that I found from it I thought was worth pointing out. And if that gets even one person in the audience listening to this album, it's worth it. From the Pointer Sisters, an album called That's a Plenty. There's a song on there called Fairy Tale, which is a kind of a country-ish type of tune.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and because of that song, they ended up getting on the country charts, and they became the first African-American vocal group to be invited onto the Grand Ole Opry.
Wow. I had no idea.
Yes, so this kind of does tie back to, when we talked a few weeks back about African-American involvement in country music. It's not just like Ray Charles did one album and then 40 years later, Beyonce was the next person to do a country album.
No. Obviously, there have been, Black artists involved in country music. Always.
Indeed. So like I said, the album, That's a Plenty. Even if you just listen to the song Fairy Tale, I mean, I think you would dig it. And if this is something that, has people out there that are listening to us, our friends at home, check it out. How about I go on to the next one?
Sounds good.
All right. We go from the Pointer Sisters to the debut album of Kiss.
Oh, yeah. Finally one you like.
Yes, with the song Strutter, Deuce, Nothing to Lose, Firehouse, Cold Gin, a lot of their instant classics came off of that first album. The first song I ever heard Kiss play live when the original members of the band reunited in the late 90s was Deuce on stage. One hell of a great introduction. And for as many problems as I have with the members of Kiss, mainly Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons as horrible human beings, they do have a musical legacy. It's simple. To me, it's like the Sesame Street or the Muppet Show of rock music, in the sense that this is what ideally you would find first, and then the more you put into your music, you can branch out and then check out other more complicated stuff going on. But this is just essentially like to me, there's not much difference between like this and like 50s music apart from just the volume.
Really?
Yeah. Different production methods, of course, producing it, but like I thought it was pretty solid.
Pretty solid rock and roll.
Yes. Yeah. Any thoughts on Kiss?
I mean, Kiss was ridiculous and so appealing to children.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they look like clowns.
I mean, that was part of the mystique. I think that's part of the reason why I love the band as a kid. Just wild, over the top type of stuff. Like my entertainment is not subtle.
No,
what works for me is like pie in the face type of deal, and that's Kiss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You do love the pie in the face.
Yeah, it can be funny when done right.
Yes.
Done right. All right, how about I go on to the next one?
Sounds good.
Little band you may have heard of out of England called Queen released their second album. The big song off of that, Seven Seas of Rye.
I don't know that song.
Well, you were missing out. Seven Seas of Rye. It's a great. It's one of those great songs that I love listening to with like headphones or earbuds in. It's just produced really well and just makes you feel like you're in some sword and sorcery epic. You just want to grab like a broadsword, raise it in the air, and sing along with the song as well. Now, this will be the only band that we'll talk about having a second album released in 74, but it was actually a common practice for a lot of bands to have more than one full album released in the calendar year. So, yeah, so we'll dive into more Queen later. How about we go on to the next choice?
Sounds good.
All right. Aerosmith released their second album. Two big tracks off of there were Same Old Song and Dance and Train Kept A-Rollin'.
Yeah, don't know those either.
Yeah, I do. Train Kept A-Rollin', pretty decent song. It's the song that it was the very first song the band played together.
Mm.
And then they found out that it was also the very first song that the members of Led Zeppelin played together the first time they got together to play music.
Really?
And yeah, just one of those common linking songs. So yeah, not much more to say about that. And Aerosmith were at this point just getting into the groove of the music business for good and bad. And this album is not gonna go down as like their absolute best, but it's an important one because it's the early stages of the group. It's them coming up with their voice.
Right, discovering who they were.
Yep. All right, shall I go on to the next one?
Yes.
All right, the next one, when we used to record album reviews on this show, for the longest time I thought about including an album from this particular artist, but I just felt it wasn't going to be appropriate because how do you talk about Frank Zappa?
It's a good question.
You know, like even though a lot of the songs that he's released in the public seem silly, the musicianship behind it is absolutely insane.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the album in question that was released in 74 is Apostrophe, and the two big hits off of that are Don't Eat the Yellow Snow and Cosmic Debris.
Yeah, Frank Zappa was brilliant. And his music is like jazz in that it's sometimes really discordant, but, you can tell the virtuosity.
Yeah, like he did, like who would have thought you would have like a xylophone on a rock album, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And a xylophone player was a part of his regular touring group as well, but just so intricate, and like the thing that people do make the mistake of that I've seen, because of the fact that the lyrics of some of his songs can be so silly, they do tend to disregard him overall, and that is a big mistake. You know, just if you're going to do anything with Frank Zappa, just listen to the music itself. I wouldn't even focus on the lyrics. If you find lyrics that you like, that even better. Bonus, icing on the cake there. But just, he's one of the best musicians ever born.
Really?
In my opinion.
Wow.
Yep. Any other thoughts on Mr. Zappa, or shall we go on?
Let's go on, shall we?
All right, yes. The next one here, from a little band called Lynyrd Skynyrd, their second album called Second Helping, had Sweet Home Alabama and Call Me the Breeze.
I don't know Call Me the Breeze, but of course I know Sweet Home Alabama.
Yeah, and definitely one of those problematic songs. Like, on the one hand, in theory, I don't necessarily mind people being happy about the region of the world that they grew up in and wanting to celebrate that. But when we're talking about Alabama in the 70s, just a few years pass, and George Wallace may have still been governor at this particular point.
Exactly.
You know, having all of that go down, and then have the backup singers in the song be black women singing, the background chorus along with it. Just, it's problematic. I mean, that has to be pointed out. That doesn't make it a bad song, and I'm not going to shame anybody for continuing to listen to Lynyrd Skynyrd or anything like that, but you got to call it what it is.
You're absolutely right, and that's exactly what it is.
Yeah. Anything else about Lynyrd Skynyrd?
No, just, I'm not interested.
All right.
Like, take it to somebody else, because I don't care.
Yeah, I don't want to listen to it. It's garbage.
It's garbage.
Yeah. All right. The next one here from Mr. Billy Preston. He had an album called The Kids and Me with a big track on there, Nothing from Nothing.
Hey.
Nothing from Nothing means nothing. Yeah. This guy legitimately could have been the fifth Beatle if it weren't for Alan Klein screwing up the Beatles management situation at the start of the 70s. Plans were in place for Billy Preston to be the organ player for the Beatles.
Well, and he was.
For that one album. But again, he was essentially at that point a guest musician. If you think about it, just how if you watch the Peter Jackson documentary, you saw that he just showed up in the studio because he was a friend. They had played with him before in Germany at the Star Club when I guess the Beatles had opened up for Little Richard, and Billy Preston was part of Little Richard's touring group.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so that's how they knew each other and were friends. And, from there, with the meetup in the studio while they were recording what became the Let It Be album, at that point, it was just like, this just works, so let's try and keep it. But fate had other plans.
Yeah.
But definitely one worth checking out. And, also, too, the more I get older, and I've talked about this on the show too, it does seem like that there is a concerted effort really to not signal boost black musical accomplishments or just black music history in this country.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to take an example out of acting, there's this woman by the name of Amanda Peet, who's an actress, and for a while in the 2000s she just showed up in everything, and I just thought she was one of the most mediocre actresses that ever, an Amanda Peet appearance in a movie was a guarantee that they just got somebody that had a pulse. And
that it didn't matter whether they were a good actress or not actor.
Yeah, and while there are other actors and actresses out there that are minorities or whatever and aren't getting those opportunities, or if they do get the opportunities, those opportunities aren't necessarily signal boosted outside of the particular community that it's initially being sold to. Think of the Tyler Perry stuff, for instance. Tyler Perry was huge in the black community before he ever became known in the white community. He was already a billionaire with his Medea stuff, before it got into the mainstream.
Wow.
Mainstream meaning, the white
audience.
White audience, yeah. But so anyway, take some time, put this record on, have some fun. Any thoughts on Billy Preston, or should we move on?
Billy Preston was amazing. I mean, my exposure to Billy Preston, it was watching the Peter Jackson documentary, Let It Be, and I was really impressed with how he just was ad-libbing amazing music on Abbey Road and Let It Be.
Well, yeah, I mean, another musician that was a part of Little Richard's touring group was kind of a musician in the same way. Jimi Hendrix.
Hey!
Jimi Hendrix was actually fired, though, by Little Richard because Little Richard didn't want anybody else standing him up.
Right, looking better than him.
Yeah, but to be able to do that type of music for, long periods of time, great musicians. So, speaking of great musicians, the next one is an absolute classic. David Bowie, Diamond Dogs.
Hey!
We got the title track, Diamond Dogs, Rebel Rebel. The album itself does have this, it was initially going to be kind of like a rock opera based on 1984 by George Orwell.
Right.
And while there are still some tracks on there that do reference that particular story, they do have other songs in there as well. But just one hell of a good album. One we did review on the show before, too.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on Diamond Dogs?
Just a great album.
Indeed.
Yeah, great album.
Yeah, definitely up there with one of Bowie's best. And this is another one that I've talked about before too in the past. If you get a chance to read a David Bowie interview or watch a David Bowie interview and he talks about a book he's reading, write down the book he's reading and read it. 9 times out of 10, you're really going to like the choice.
Nice. You know, he was brilliant.
And a voracious reader, apparently. There have been books about Bowie's, book recommendations as well. So there is that. So how about I go on to the next one?
Let's do it.
All right. I'm sure this is your all-time absolute favorite. Whiz Bang Band. Bad Company.
Oh, God.
Yeah, released their self-titled debut. It was released on Swan Song Records, the label that Led Zeppelin created.
Hey.
So there is that, but the album in question had Can't Get Enough of Your Love.
Yeah.
And of course the title track, Bad Company, Till the Day We Die.
Yeah, so awful. So awful.
Yeah, Freddie Mercury was a fan, though. The lead singer of Bad Company, Paul Rodgers, ended up touring with Queen in the 2000s, and they actually made an album together.
Really?
Yeah. Is it worth writing home about? No. And the intention wasn't to, make the greatest Queen record of all time anyway. It was more of just a celebration. But Freddie Mercury liked Paul Rodgers' vocals. So there is that, but for me, Bad Company, to me, it rings of all the bad classic rock radio stations that are in the country, because it seems like this is one of the few songs that always gets played.
Yeah.
And it's just, maybe there was some point in time to where I would have given them a chance, but not anymore.
No.
Yeah, just too much. Any other thoughts on Bad Company, or shall I go on?
Just go on away from Bad Company.
Yeah. So the next album that we're going to talk about here is called Boogity Boogity. It's by Ray Stevens, and it has his most well-known track, The Streak.
Oh, they call him The Streak.
Yeah. Streaking in the 70s was kind of a big thing. I don't know why. And yeah, Ray Stevens, I guess he's been labeled as country.
Yeah.
But he did a lot of novelty songs.
Yes.
More than anything.
He was novelty country.
Yeah, so it was always meant as a joke. I believe word has come out, I believe he's just retiring from performing.
I would imagine.
Yeah. It's good.
Seems like the kind of guy that would stick around.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that, what is that? Maybe it was just too wild in Branson.
Yeah, right.
Something like that, yeah. Yeah, talking about...
Much too wild in Branson.
Yeah, I mean, I if he has an audience, great. His stuff was never for me, and probably what instantly turned me off was, K-Tel, it would have television commercials in the 80s, for various compilation albums.
Right.
And they did have one with Ray Stevens, and my mother was like, "Oh, The Streak," and so she started singing it. And if she started singing it and liking it, it's like, not for me, no.
Isn't that funny how you can just tell that whatever your parents like, you're not going to like?
Yeah, I mean, I try to keep that in mind too. My oldest loves Linkin Park.
Hey.
And me, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, shall we go on to the next choice?
Yes.
All right. Mr. John Denver released an album called Back Home Again, with one of the main tracks off of there being Thank God I'm a Country Boy.
Hey, that's a pretty good song.
Yeah, in the 70s, he was labeled as country, but I think if people are being honest, you would put him more in the folk category.
Mm-hmm.
But again, what's the difference between folk and country apart from geography? I mean, folk would be like the north, the northeast part of the world version of country, if that makes sense.
And Western.
Or something like that. But Thank God I'm a Country Boy, pretty solid song. I think this is, yeah, I mean, it's one of his most well-known songs. He's not a bad musician. Yeah, I would put him in like the greatest hits category for me. And at the end of the day, even if you don't like him, he still stood up for music in the right way at the PMRC hearings in the 80s.
Yeah.
Like, in fact, he was one of the musicians that they ended up taking seriously because, Frank Zappa showed up, and Frank Zappa, there's a reason he was never a politician. He spoke his mind, but, it wasn't in a convincing way. It was just like, you guys are fucking idiots type of deal, which was true. Dee Snider from Twisted Sister as well, minus the makeup. Dee Snider coming in with the full perm and everything like that. People didn't take him seriously, but John Denver showing up was
it's like having Kermit show up. Like, he's beloved, John Denver.
Yeah. I mean,
and he's sung with Kermit.
He did. It annoyed me because my sister used to, like, one year we watched like a Muppets Christmas special or something like that. That John Denver guested on, and they sang, she'll be coming round the mountain when she comes, like that. And I hated that because it was an earworm. And then all my sister had to do was just, she'll be coming round the mountain. It's like, fuck you. It's like in those early South Park episodes when Cartman hears the first verse to Come Sail Away.
Come sail away, come sail away, come sail with me.
Shut up. But any other thoughts on John Denver?
Nope.
All right. The next choice here, Elton John released an album called Caribou. Two of the big hits off of there, Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me and The Bitch Is Back.
Hey.
Yeah, like Elton in the 80s, when I was just becoming aware of music, that was when his audience among younger people wasn't growing as much as it did in the 70s. And that's fine. I mean, like, yeah, he didn't have to go on welfare people or anything like that. It's just what happens in music. So I didn't take the time to really dive into his catalog until much later. And while I would not call him my absolute favorite artist, he's definitely part of the greatest hits category. I mean, a number of his songs show up on various playlists of mine. At some point. Your thoughts on Elton John?
Love Elton John. Mm-hmm. He was my uncle's favorite performing artist. And so, that's how I heard of Elton John and really enjoyed his music always.
Not much more to say about that. How about we do a couple more?
Sounds good.
All right. How about we talk about someone else with E in their name? Eric Clapton released 461 Ocean Boulevard. The big hit off of there was I Shot the Sheriff.
Hey.
The cover of the Bob Marley and the Wailers song, which at that particular time was released just a year previous.
Oh, hey.
Yeah, so relatively new song at that particular point. This was at a time to where Clapton was kind of chafing at the idea of being a guitar god. People wanted him to just do like the 30, 40-minute guitar solos, and, he wanted to do more of just songs,
Uh-huh.
And so a lot of his albums during this era have great songs, but they're not what you necessarily wanted from Eric Clapton.
Huh.
He's not shredding at the guitar, doing his thing or anything like that. But, and I wouldn't exactly call this, my absolute favorite. Like the I Shot the Sheriff, his version to me is just a little too Pat Booney,
uh-huh.
if that makes sense. But apparently Bob Marley did approve of that. And, Eric and Bob Marley knew each other. So any thoughts on Eric Clapton?
I've never been a fan. That's all I'll say.
All right. Yeah. We'll leave it at that, and we'll go on to the last one that we'll talk about this week here. Donnie and Marie Osmond released the album I'm Leaving It All Up to You. Why am I including this on here? One, it is amazing just how famous a person could be at one point in time, and then not too long afterwards, their barely noticeable in public, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like in the 70s, Donnie and Marie were quite huge. The Osmond family were quite huge. And now, like, yeah, people our age are still going to be aware. But even with our people in our age group, we weren't necessarily knowing them from, their albums or the variety shows in the 70s. They were just names at that point when we were kids.
Yeah.
So there is that. But one thing I always remember was this Saturday Night Live sketch. It was it was in the early 80s when Eddie Murphy was a part of the show, and it was a Gumby Christmas special.
Oh, uh-huh.
And they had Donnie and Marie show up, and I forgot the actor who played Donnie, but Marie was played by Julia Louis-Dreyfus when she was on the show, and like her and the guy were singing a song, getting closer, and then before you know it, just tongue action everywhere. They started making out.
So grody.
Yeah, it was funny. But do you have any thoughts on Donnie and Marie?
They were very popular when I was a child, but I never understood why, and I thought they were weirdos.
It's like a Republican's version of what people should be, and just bland. It's like a glass of milk.
Weren't they like Jehovah's Witnesses or something?
No, Mormons.
Mormons.
Yeah, they had a whole tribe in Utah.
Yeah.
In the 90s, Donnie and Marie did have their own daytime talk show for a while.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. There was that. And then Donnie Osmond did have one song that did kind of get some airplay on MTV.
Oh.
So, there were attempts at comebacks along the way, but I don't think
they ever came back.
Yeah, thank God. Any more thoughts on Donnie Marie?
No, I think that's plenty.
Have you ever watched the news and wished that you could see something more positive, or looked online and saw all the aggravation and anger and hatred out there and thought to yourself, why can't I just see more positive things in my life? Hi, I'm Mike Rathbun, and I'm the host of the Kindness Matters podcast. Every week, we promise to bring you stories that will uplift you and motivate you and inspire you to see the kindness and be the kindness that this world needs more of. Tune in, the Kindness Matters podcast with me, your host, Mike Rathbun.
Professor Aubrey has a package in her hands that we have to say is quite delicious.
It is, Tim. It's Brazil from Coffee Bros. An amazing coffee with notes of cocoa and cherry candy.
Nice.
Delicious.
Indeed it was. Like you and I, we both drink coffee in very different ways. I need it, 9,000 degrees hot. And me, I make my coffee and then put in as many ice cubes as I can. I'm like the guy from Clerks, what am I supposed to drink this coffee hot? Type of guy. But you tried it your way, I tried it my way, and we both really enjoyed the flavor of this particular flavor of coffee.
Absolutely. It is a relatively new roastery in New York, New York. Those little town blues.
Yep.
Taking the Coffee Bros away.
Exactly.
Anyway, they're relatively new. They've been roasting since 2019.
Yes, but they do have great connections around the world in the coffee growing areas to be able to get the best beans, to be able to give their customers the best product. And you, our friends at home, if you go to coffeebros.com and you order your own batch of this coffee or any other of the delicious brands of coffee that they have on their website, in the promo code spot, you put FTN10, we're going to be able to save you 10%.
That's right, 10%. It's going to be like $1.50. It's going to be awesome.
But that's what friends are for.
That's what friends are for.
That's right.
$1.50 when you need it.
Exactly. You won't be able to get on the city bus, but you will be able to save some money to be able to get some wonderful coffee. Again, head to coffeebros.com and in the promo code box, put in FTN10 and you will be able to have some delicious coffee.
Yep.
Drink away, people. All right. I think what we'll do then is wrap things up this week. But before we go, birthday girl, how's your birthday week been?
It's been wonderful. I really enjoyed it. My big 50th birthday thing was to go to Mexico. And so that happened a while back. So I have to have those memories of my beautiful 50th birthday trip. But, I've done a lot of fun things this week and still doing fun things.
That's good.
And
like recording this show.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's been a great birthday.
Well, I'm glad. Like the older you get, like the more you realize those jokes you tell your parents when you're younger about paying attention to nursing home stories on the news. Not so funny the older you get.
No, and just the constant pain.
Yeah. Like I am of the age to where Ben Gay now has to be a consideration for my everyday life. That's the part of growing old that you have to figure out. And because just some days you just wake up and you're like, do I have to move?
Yeah. Oldness.
Yeah. And
this gets worse and worse, is my understanding.
Yeah, just going to start sliding down. But thank goodness for drugs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, any other thoughts on your birthday celebrations?
No. How about you, Tim? What do you got going on?
The normal stuff. Love spending time with the dogs. The dogs that love to mount are a unique bunch.
Yeah.
Yeah, like there's one kind of blackish hair, kind of longish and shaggy, and it's funny. He'll like go up to a particular dog that he, has an interest in, and I could just picture it in my head. He's like, "Oh, hey there, you new here? Oh, wow, glad you're new here. Oh man, you got a good face. Let me lick your face. How about I give you my bone." And then you'll slide on like, yeah. And then I gotta get the spray bottle to get him off, and he's just like, what? They were asking for it.
They liked it.
Yeah. I was showing them this is how we greet people in my country.
Sounds so cute.
They are unique, to say the least, and you're constantly learning. Like there was another dog who is of the anxious type, but also quiet. His main thing is that he will just kind of walk circles. He'll start at the gate to where the dogs enter and exit. And then he'll circle the room, go back to the window that looks into the boarding room, and then go back and then do the whole thing over and over again. But occasionally he'll come up to me and, just hop up on his back two paws and just want me to pet him for a minute. Mm-hmm. And I'll do that anytime he asks. Well, the other day I go into work and this other dog is there, this big, huge Great Dane, like a living Muppet. I think I talked about that dog on the show before. Hey, mister, how you doing? And I show up and, she immediately gets on her back paws, the Great Dane, and puts her front paws on my chest. And I'm wearing just a T-shirt at the time. And I'm a sensitive type. Princess in the Pea, really.
Yeah, you really are.
Yeah. So when that dog did that, I was like, ow. And when I did that, the shy, quiet, anxious dog started approaching that Great Dane and snarling really loud.
Like, don't you touch my human.
Yeah, and I immediately, had to back that dog away. And it was a shock. Like, on the one hand, it's just like, obviously something I'm doing is working with that dog because, it saw me as a resource of some sort it needed to defend. But on the other hand, you can't encourage that.
No.
In a group of 70 plus dogs, if you're going to have other dogs jump up on you, you're going to say ow, and you can't have fights starting just because you say ow.
No.
So that was interesting to have to deal with. But again, it's all about learning. It's all about doing what I can to make sure the emotional temperature in that room stays consistent. Mm-hmm. Because, like when it comes to stuff like mounting, some dogs don't mind, but there are some dogs that don't like it. Sure. And sometimes you got to let the dogs to be able to, tell the other to buzz off, you want to be able to give them that freedom to say buzz off, but sometimes they're not going to do it the right way. Sometimes it's going to be, I don't like what you're doing right now, so I'm going to fucking kill you. That's their mindset. And like, yeah, keeping the temperature down is vital when you have a huge group of dogs. But like, I just love being able to get those personal connections with the dogs as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always great to hear your doggy stories.
Yeah. Especially the mounting ones. I love taking pictures of those. Those are always funny.
Yeah. It's classic humor.
Yeah. Anything to make my inner 12-year-old boy laugh. But anyway, I think that will wrap us up for this week. Did you have anything else you wanted to say to our friends at home?
Nope.
All right. Well, next week we will resume our chat on 1974 in music. For the most electrifying professor in podcasting today, each Monday we'll have something in this podcasting space to entertain your ear holes. Until we meet again, we bid you adieu.
So long.
Keep on rocking in the free world. Subscribe to Friends Talking Nerdy
on YouTube Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify,
or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Goodbye, darling.